This was another thing that Chomsky really stressed when we spoke, was that he said that you will not learn about the human mind or how human language works by studying LLMs.
So I'm not so sure about the latter. I think that language ultimately is the solution to a particular problem. The problem is how to translate mental representations, which are some kind of fuzzy hierarchical hypergraph, in such a way that another human being is able to build an equivalent representation in their mind. And to make that happen, we need to constrain the mental representations into a protocol that is learnable and also interpretable with very limited resources. And our brain has very limited resources because it's not able to perform arbitrary operations in a stable manner. There are certain problems that we cannot solve in a parallelizable fashion. So for instance, when we parse language, it makes sense to limit the stack size that we need to do that. In a computer, you can make a stack that is millions of bytes deep, and that's not a big problem. But in a human mind, if you go more on 4 levels of indirection, you lose track of what's happening because you can only keep so many balls in the air. So in some sense, human languages are constrained to mapping mental representations into strings of discrete symbols that need to be so few that they are learnable. And they need to be parsable, so interpretable and constructible, these strings, with the stack depths of, say, 4 or so, give or take. And this defines a space of possible solutions. And I suspect that human languages are roughly congruent with that space in a way. It's solutions that are given by the constraints of that space. And if we want to discover the criteria that are common to all human languages, we can probably evaluate commonalities in the tokens of LLMs that have learned multiple languages.
Yes, what Chomsky was stressing was that the fact that LLMs can learn quote-unquote impossible languages that humans cannot learn is just a proof that they work in such a radically different way from our own language learning faculties that we're just too dissimilar for us to use LLMs to learn about human language.
I don't think that one follows from the other. The premise is, of course, true. The LLM training works very differently from the way in which we learn language. We could not learn language in the same way as an LLM does. And on the other hand, the LLM is not just more inefficient, because we basically need to give it massive amounts of data before it's able to learn a language. But once we train an LLM to do that, we can also give it a dictionary of a new language that was not in the training data and a grammar. And it's able to internalize this and then instantly use that language at the level of a human speaker. Right. And that's something that a human speaker couldn't do, because a human speaker would need some more practice, arguably, to memorize all those words and extrapolate the grammar and understand it. Right? So there is stuff that's falling in place in the LLM because it has vastly more resources and a very much more powerful way to represent causal structure than the human brain does. That is not available to the human brain. So the LLM is both more and less efficient than the human brain is. But the LLM is building a representational structure. And this representational structure is aligned to language use. And it would be surprising if there are not some similarities in the structure that the LLM is discovering and in the structure that the brain is discovering at a certain level of coarse graining, at a certain level of abstraction. And we find this with vision, for instance. When we are training an end-to-end system on images to be able to reproduce images, we find that the hierarchy of this vision model is quite similar to the hierarchy of the visual models in the human brain. So we find equivalence of a lot of the brain areas basically in the layers of the neural network, despite the neural network not working one-to-one comparable to neurons. But this is something that Chris Olah calls the universality hypothesis, which is basically if you have a general enough representational substrate and you train it sufficiently long on a given problem, then different modeling approaches, in some sense, are going to lead to a similar model structure.